I have the pleasure now to spend a minute or two introducing Myleka Garnett, one of the two people who you're going to hear from. And you'll also be hearing from Anthony Garnett, who's her first cousin. The Garnett family is synonymous with success in the athletic fields and the courts, and also in academia. And you'll find more about both of them as I speak. They are first cousins. Myleka was born and raised in Seaside, went to Seaside High, played 2 years basketball at MPC, in which she set records that are still standing about 16, 17 years later. And then she transferred to Baruch College in New York. She had never been to New York City. I'm a native of Brooklyn. Moving to New York from any place is tough, but coming from the beautiful Monterey Peninsula is even a little bit tougher. She then earned her master's degree in psychology from Brandman University and has worked as a mental health therapist in the MPUSD, including at an elementary school and had her alma mater, Seaside High. While she was at MPC, she was all-team first conference both seasons and was really known for a couple of things, being a great rebounder, but also being a great teammate. The school won about 20 games her first year. Her coach, Wendy Bates, who you just heard from, described her as a supportive teammate in a quiet way, versatile, and really got along well, was a leader of the team. At Baruch College, one of the problems she had to overcome is she got there to New York City and the housing arrangements didn't really work out. So she spent time looking for housing, staying with friends, and eventually lived in Brooklyn and then Queens. And she had to commute about an hour each way each day, and to master the New York subway system is probably like mastering Einstein's theory of relativity. It's not easy, but she became very good there, and she really flourished both as a basketball player and in academia. She describes herself as a positive person, and she always wanted to work in mental health therapy, and she's back at home with us, and she loves to help people in a therapeutic sense. And I give you now Myleka Garnett.
Thank you for that introduction, Mr. Leader. And first, I'd like to thank the Booster Club for inviting me to be a speaker today. And thank you to everyone that's here. Definitely appreciate it. So like Mr. Leader said, I'm born and raised in Seaside. I attended primary and secondary schools within the MPUSD. I went to Seaside High from 2000 to 2004. And I played basketball. I started in middle school, but I don't want to say it didn't take it serious, but I got more serious with it when I got to high school. I was able to play on traveling teams with the Boys and Girls Club down in Seaside under Coach Ron Powell. And then I also had the opportunity to play for my uncle's team down in LA, Raymond Garnett, for 2 summers. So that was definitely fun. Let's see. I knew once I graduated, I knew that I was going to be attending MPC, but I actually had no intentions of playing basketball at all. I was gonna retire at the age of 17. I was done. But I had a few friends that were going to be going to MPC and were gonna be playing. And one particular, my friend Dominique McClendon, she kind of was like really trying to get me to come during the summer and watch summer league games. And so I finally told her, sure, I'll go check it out. And then that's when I was able to meet Coach Wendy Bates. And I don't remember what the conversation was, but I'm pretty sure that I gave her a hard time about playing. But eventually I decided, why not? I'm going to MPC, why not continue to try to play? And it ended up being a great experience. I went from not wanting to play to when my 2 years were over, I remember saying I wish that MPC was a 4-year school and I wish I could continue to play. So it was funny to see like how my opinion changed within those 2 years. Let's see. I played at MPC from 2004 to 2006. And after that, I had a few schools that were recruiting me, but not too heavy. There was one school in particular, which was Baruch College, that was pretty much in the forefront. And I mean, when I found out that it was in New York City, I'm like, of course I want to go there. But I kind of had a hill or a hump that I had to kind of go over before I actually was able to go there. But eventually it all worked out. I played there from 2006 to 2008. Our 2008 year, we won the CUNY championship, and we were pretty good. We had a pretty good team. I actually was able to go with two teammates, again, Dominique McClendon and Carly Whipple. So I think for sure that definitely played a role in me being able to stay there as long as I did, because I personally don't think I would have been able to stay as long. I wouldn't have lasted if I had to win by myself. So it was great to go with two teammates. Let's see, I was able to graduate in 2009 with my bachelor's degree in psychology. And at that time, I kind of was just like in the moment of, I'm done with school. I never have to go to school ever again if I don't want to. And I just kind of was thinking that small at the time. But about a year later, I knew that I wanted to get into mental health, and I knew that I was going to need more than just a bachelor's degree, and I was ready to go back to school. But I didn't really know exactly, where I wanted to go. So I decided that I was going to go home in 2010, and I've been here ever since. I started working back within the MPUSD at an after-school program, after-school academy, and I was a program leader. Then I moved to a site director. And then I went back to school at Brandman University, and I was able to receive my master's degree there. And let's see, in 2018, I transitioned from the after school program to now a more therapeutic setting where I am working with students. I'm still able to work with students, but more in a therapeutic way. And let's see, I'm a mental health therapist, and that's pretty much it, I guess. That was kind of fast, but that's pretty
Myleka,
much
let
it.
me ask you one question. Obviously, you've worked hard, you've succeeded. Along the way, were there one or more obstacles that you faced that you really had to grit your teeth and figure out how to
How to
accomplish
do
them?
it. Yes. So I would say the beginning of just being able to go to Baruch College was definitely a small obstacle. I had been in contact with the coach, and we had talked about, going on a visit and seeing the school and the city. But when I went to go back and talk to my parents about it, my mom was like, no, like, you're not going, that's too far. You're not even going to go on the visit. You can't, like, just forget about it pretty much. So I went back to Coach Bates like the next day or a couple days later, because I was supposed to check in with the coach again, and we were going to actually put in arrangements of when I was going to go visit. And so I went to her office and I told her what happened. And I was like, I don't even really want to call him. I don't want to tell him. And she said, well, you cannot not talk to him. You need to tell him what's going on. And there's two outcomes. If he really is interested, then he'll do what he needs to try to, work with your family, or at least talk to your family. And if not, then, it just wasn't meant to be. So we actually called him that day and explained what was going on. And he said he totally understood, and that he would call my parents later that night. And he did. He called my mom and my dad, talked to them on the phone, and they decided, instead of me going on my own to try to decide if it was a good fit, my father would come with me. And so my dad came. They took us around the school. We visited the school, the coaches, the teammates, the dean of athletics. We visited the city and a few neighborhoods where we possibly were going to meet or to live. And my dad said, he thought it was a good idea. And we brought it back to my mom, and she was like, okay, well, fine. Since he said it's okay, then it's okay.
Well, Baruch College is a school with a very fine reputation, and among the schools that Myleka played were City College in New York, Medgar Evers School, Brooklyn College, Hunter College, and Brooklyn Tech. So these are all fine schools with fine reputations, and going to Baruch is quite a feather in your cap. By the way, if any of you have any questions of Myleka or later of Anthony, just put them in the chat box for me, and we'll try to get to those we can. Myleka, thank you very much. We wish you continued success in your field, working with people in mental health.
Thank you.
Obviously, a very significant thing.
Thank you.
I now wanted to introduce Myleka's cousin, but he's quite significant in his own right. That's Anthony Garnett. I do have to throw in a little bit of plug here. When I started at the Herald, way back between the Jurassic age and the Pleistocene age, One of his uncles, Ronnie, I think Ron's here, was quite a star pitcher for Seaside High. And of course, Ronnie was one of 7 Garnett brothers and very well known. I don't know all the names. There's Renee, and there's Wayne, and there's Mike, and there's Renee, and there's Reggie. And they really had quite an imprint on athletics on the Monterey Peninsula. Um, Anthony is now in his 4th years of working with another great local athlete, Herman Edwards, who is the head coach of ASU. Anthony is in his 4th year of working with with Herman Edwards, who had quite a local career. Uh, when ASU coach Edwards hired Anthony, he said he brings tremendous experience and knowledge to our program. He has a tireless work ethic with a background in several different facets in the game of football. Anthony went to a Seaside High and then was quite a star at MPC. And I'll tell you more about MPC in a minute. He transferred to Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, and he led them to their first D1 AA playoff berth. They captured the Great West Conference title in his 2nd season at San Luis Obispo, and Anthony was quite a fine quarterback. He finished in the top 10 in the nation in passing efficiency, tossed 21 TDs, added another 12 rushing, and led the Mustangs to a 10-3 record. Meanwhile, getting a bachelor's degree in kinesiology, which, if you don't know, I didn't know, but it's the study of human body movement, which is quite a good for an athlete. He came back. He coached in various places, but he helped lead Seaside High to an undefeated season and a Monterey Bay League title and a sectional semifinals in his year at Seaside High. But he also served as tight ends and wide receivers coach at MPC, and he was responsible for developing the weekly schematic framework of passing plays. And meanwhile, as if he didn't have anything else to do while he was at MPC, he earned a Master of Science degree from Ohio University in sport pedagogy, concentrating in coaching athletics. He also coached quarterbacks at Missouri University S&T. His coach at MPC, and then someone whom he worked under, was Mike Rasmussen, who was a big fan of Anthony's. He said he really grew tremendously, both as an athlete and as a coach. And he did get that full scholarship to Cal Poly. And he's just doing very well. And I'm sure it's great for him to be working with the legendary Herman Edwards. Anthony, without further ado, the floor is yours.
Well, Lewis, there's a few things. Thank you for telling me that the clocks changed, because here in Arizona, they don't. So I was going to be an hour late because just yesterday, you guys were an hour behind us. So I appreciate that, Lewis. Other thing is, yes, my Uncle Reggie, he was the baseball pitcher. My Uncle Reggie was the baseball pitcher. My father, Ronnie, he played basketball at MPC. And then my Uncle Kelvin, rest in peace, and Uncle Raymond were the other two, the youngest. So, not to be forgotten, but those are the 2 youngest ones of the 7 boys. No women. My grandma said she loved boys, but she had no daughters. But I appreciate everybody for taking the time on a Sunday to link in and have time to, listen to our story, I guess. And my story is simple, just a Seaside kid staying out of trouble, and had a great circle that I grew up with in great 2-parent home with my mother, Joyce, and father, Ron Garnett, that, with a great support system with all my uncles still staying local. So, being raised in Seaside was such a great life, so much diversity, and, a beautiful area that you take for granted until you leave and go to a different state, and it might be humid, or, like now in the desert, and when you go back home, you get that clean air right from the coast. So much to be grateful for. But starting off, it was one of those things. I just enjoyed sports. I had and was forced to do the academic part. It kind of came easy, but my mother stayed on me and wouldn't allow anything less than a C growing up if I wanted to continue to play any type of sport. But that was one of the things that was just bred into me. Like you talked about, Lewis, was we have all those uncles and, my father that were all student athletes at one time or another. And, some of them earned full ride scholarships. 2 of them, I believe, earned scholarships from MPC. My Uncle Wayne went to Fresno State. Myleka's father, Michael, went to Cal State Fullerton back when they had a football program. So they kind of paved the way. I kind of knew what I wanted to do once I became a football player. My mom, another one, would not let me play tackle football. I wanted to play so bad as a young kid. And I'd always play, tackle out in the parking lots, on gravel. Other time we'd be playing after school on the field at King Middle School, elementary school at Manzanita right there. What is it now? IMS or ISM, So I was always playing, but my mother would not let me play tackle football. We had a rule or a bet, I guess you can call it, some kind of agreement that I still have to uphold, learning how to play the piano to play football or to play football. So that will get done. I learned a couple little notes back when I was in college. Some teammates helped me out, and I came back home and played a couple little things for my mom, but nothing serious. And I can't play it to today. So when I get the time, I'm definitely going to have to take some time out to learn how to play the piano. But I was a baseball and basketball kid. One of those things where I wanted to play both professionally. You think you're talented, you're having success locally and even on tournaments outside of town. It was one of those things I was like, I think I could do these both, professionally when I get older. And that's a kid thinking when I'm in elementary school. It's like, hey, we're competing in national tournaments and getting a little success. Why can't this continue, right? So that was always the thought. And when I got to high school, my sophomore season, the coaches convinced my mother that I should be able to play football now, which she did. And I fell in love with it right away. I think it was probably our first day of actual hitting. I was playing a little free safety and quarterback as well, but those were different times then. It wasn't like it is now where the concussion awareness is aware like that. It wasn't, wasn't as, I shouldn't say important, but it was kind of one of those things about being tough, right? But it's a tough sport as is. And I fell in love with it, I think, when I actually got hit my hardest, 15 years old, running down the field, and I think we're doing a punt cover drill. And I've never played tackle football, so I made the mistake of looking up for the football, and there was a lead blocker right in front of me, hit me square right underneath my chin. And obviously it didn't hurt, popped right back up, but that feeling and knowing that you could get back up and go do it again, whether you're giving the hit or taking the blow, did something to me. And I was like, man, I actually love this game, right? And that was the same year that I kind of retired from baseball and just focused on football and basketball. My Uncle Raymond actually told me it's very hard to excel in three sports, being a three-sport athlete. There's a lot of people that are talented that could do great in all of them, but to be elite or, to be your best, he told me you need to probably focus on two, which I took that to heart, and I started just focusing on football and basketball. So after that, I still was playing traveling basketball, and was trying to take football to the next level. It was still all new to me, especially at the quarterback position. And we did pretty well my senior year at Seaside High. We ended up 9-2. We were on a 9-game win streak, and I blew it the last 2 games. It's one of those things. It's longevity. It's how long and how can you stay healthy, and how long can you survive a season. It always gets harder towards the end, but it was a great run, great team, great coach have with me. But that was pretty much it. And then this kind of goes into the question you asked my cousin Myleka about obstacles. Growing up, I never wanted to go to MPC. The only knock I really had on it was seeing former athletes from Seaside. They would go to MPC. I knew they were talented. I watched them all through high school. My dad and uncles would take me to multiple high school local games, Seaside High games, Monterey High games, MPC games, football and basketball, right? But some of those athletes I'd see from Seaside that were so talented wouldn't get scholarships, whether it was their fault or whatever happened. I'd see them still around town, and then whether they're working a 9-to-5 or if they're out in the streets, I didn't want that life or that to become me, even though oblivious, like my parents would have never let that happen to me. But that was my whole motivation growing up. Like, I'm not going to MPC. I'm gonna make sure academically I'm gonna be able to get into a 4-year college, and athletically, whether I have to walk on somewhere or whatever it was, I'm going to play somewhere at a university. So that was my mindset. And, it just so happened my father, I don't say convinced me, but he had that heart to heart talk with me. And Coach Rasmussen did a great job, hell of a job recruiting me. Coach Rasmussen had his home visit, came in, and he sold everything as he should have, and rightfully so. Like, I needed MPC. I said that probably right after I left, but at the time, I still had a ton of friends that played with me at Seaside High that were going to be playing in MPC, but my whole life was all bent on, nope, I'm going to be able to make it out athletically and academically. So Rasmussen, hats off to Coach Raz for doing a hell of a job recruiting, and plus not having a scholarship offer coming from Seaside High, that kind of helped as well. It's like, all right, you can walk on or you can gray shirt at UC Davis. That was the only interest I had when they were still a Division II school. And, my dad was like, no, you can go pretty much to school for free right down the road. You have a quarterback coach, probably the first legit quarterback coach who's the head coach that has great Division I and years of experience, great mentor. My dad, pointed me in the perfect direction. So went to MPC, being a qualifier out of high school. My whole mindset then, still, I'm getting out of here. I was like, I'm leaving after one semester or after the first year, right? That was my whole thought process, so I could play 3 years at a university. And the second obstacle was my first semester. Like I said, I was a qualifier academically. I was just fine in high school and growing up, but there's a level of freedom when you get to the college level. Universities, junior college, doesn't matter. Not every professor takes attendance. And, they're not on you as much. Your counselors aren't as, your advisors aren't on you in making sure that you're keeping up with your work. And my parents were giving me a ton of freedom. I don't even think I had a curfew. They're like, hey, you're a teenager. You have your car. As long as you're responsible, what you are, do what you do. You don't drink, you don't smoke, you don't do any drugs. You don't do any of that. Just make sure you're safe. And they gave me a ton of freedom. And, I was just focused on pretty much football. And for the first time, my grades slipped. I think I only had one class that would have transferred after I finished. I think I had a bunch of withdrawals. Right after we played Hartnell, the very last game, I withdrew from all the classes that I was doing terrible in and passed like one class. So I was like, well, I'm definitely not going to transfer after this. So, had to talk to Coach Raz. He got me on a plan. And, I think I took like 18 or something crazy. I took more than like 6 courses in the spring. I took the early spring courses. I took summer school, did everything I needed to do to get back on track to where I could transfer when needed. So after that, it was kind of smooth sailing. But that Cal Poly offer didn't roll in till late, maybe the middle of my sophomore season. And it was a little stressful because we weren't having a lot of success. The year before, I had 2 All-American offensive players with me, in Maurice Mann and Antoine Bonds. And Maurice ended up going off to get drafted by the Cincinnati Bengals in the 5th round years later. So I had things, rolling, and I had 2 guys that I grew up with that kind of led the way. And it's like, man, it's not easy, but we were doing great. We didn't have the best record, but our offense was explosive. And, I didn't have any legit looks or offers, anybody calling me. That sophomore year, I did start getting some recognition. Like I said, that Cal Poly offer came about mid-year. And, I had some D2s and other schools trying to recruit me, but I was still bent on being a Division I athlete. And now where I'm at, being at Arizona State, and as much recruiting and evaluating that we do, I realize that you'll end up where you're supposed to be. If you want to get to the NFL, it's a great dream and it happens and it's the best of the best, but you can do it from all levels. You see it, but you have to be that guy. And my confidence from, like I said, when I was a kid, I'm thinking I was going to play professional baseball and basketball. That's just one of those confidence and mental things that, you think. So I seen Ronnie say something. What's going on, Coach Palmer? I'll get to the question in a minute. So,
bear down, baby.
You saw the score. You saw the score. All right. Glad you guys got some new coaches down there in Tucson. But sorry, that's a little rivalry joke between me and Coach Palmer. But let's see if you can see that. So anyway, like I was saying, I landed where I was supposed to. I'm thinking I should have been a Division I athlete, a Power 5 as they call them now. And what's crazy is that how, Coach Palmer just talked about bear down. Arizona was actually one of the schools I was trying to recruit. Sometimes they talk about coaches recruiting athletes. Athletes recruit coaches just as much because it's crazy. I get a million kids that are trying to contact me to talk about coach. I'm this, I'm that. This is my GPA. I know I can get it done. And those are usually the under recruited kids. And some of those kids are the gems and, finding the diamond in the rough. And then some of them legit can't compete at that level. And I was talking to a coach at Arizona when I was at MPC because he was recruiting my high school tight end, Tony Curtis, who got to play for the Dallas Cowboys. I was trying to sell him on, hey, we're a package deal. They weren't recruiting me. I was trying to recruit them to say, hey, I can play at this level. I know if my tight end that is legit, and ended up going out to NFL. I'm like, we already got a connection. It's only right that you bring me too. So one of those things that, the connection deal was the head coach at Cal Poly spent time at Arizona. He was, one of the creators of that Desert Swarm defense back in the 90s. And Rich Ellerson pretty much had connections still, and where he lives now in Tucson was like, you guys, if you're not really going to recruit them and don't want them, just leave them alone so we can get them. And that's kind of how it happened, and ended up at Cal Poly. Played those 2 seasons after I redshirted, had great time, started set my 13 games, ended my career pretty much, I don't say how I wanted to, but I'm glad that I can say I left it all on the field. I had to get carried off, tore an ACL, but, I'm healthy now to tell the story. It pointed me, like I said, everything happens for a reason, and it got me right into coaching. I was still trying to play after I healed up in rehab, but I started working with local high school kids down in San Luis Obispo on crutches. I was probably like a couple weeks out of surgery, and I was pretty much just pointing and doing everything verbal coaching to 4 different kids that their parents were paying me since I wasn't a college athlete anymore. They're like, hey, can you work with our kids just on a few things, footwork and some schematic things? And that's where that went. Got anything for me, Lewis?
No,
I think I had
Anthony, I didn't want to interrupt you.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for sharing that. None of you will believe this, but actually I was on the field with Anthony once. We umpired a game together. That's as much as my prowess would allow me. So anyway, Anthony and I have, I umpired youth ball for about 20 years. Obviously there was none last year. I hope it resumes. Anthony, thank you very much for sharing your story. And I think what you've really demonstrated is perseverance. And you're still a young man in coaching. You're on the sunny side of 40, and we wish you a continued success.